is Cynthia Nguyen. I'm going to be one of your hosts for this episode of Scoliosis Dialogues. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing my friend and longtime outstanding SRS member, Dr. Cristina Sacramento. For those of you who haven't had the chance of meeting her at one of the SRS meetings or hasn't worked on a committee with her or read one of her many papers, Dr. Cristina Sacramento practices in Madrid, Spain, and she's currently Chief of Spine Surgery at the University of Navarra. Cristina, thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Oh, thank you very much to give me the opportunity to talk with you and give you my experience.
Yeah, definitely. I was curious, we've had conversations in the past about a whole bunch of stuff, but I never got the chance to ask you what made you interested in orthopedic surgery to begin with?
Well, really, initially, when I thought about to be a surgeon, mainly, initially I want to be general surgeon, but when I had to select my position at the selection process, I thought that maybe I will have more work opportunities if I select at that time orthopedic surgery. So that was what I did. In fact, when I started my residency, the first year in that time was I had to spend 1 year in general surgery. So when I really started in orthopedic was in my second year. So after that long period doing what I really wanted, when I did my first ankle fracture, I thought, what the hell is this? This is like a puzzle. So I have not the life of the patient in my hands. So, but at the same time, I started to do rotation in different specialties like thoracic surgery or plastic surgery and neurosurgery. So I fall in love immediately with the spine because really was scary. So it was really important. I felt at that time that was important that I really had the capability of change the life of patients. So since my second year, I started to be very proud about how to get knowledge about the spine surgery. So I continue during my residency to join some other spine surgeons. I used to go with them after my job to see how they did their surgeries. And when I finished my residency, I did rotation also in Barcelona with Dr. Cáceres Palou. He was a spine surgeon who moved more in the European Spine Society, not at the US Society or at SRS, but he really was a very important person in Spain. And I continued my knowledge with him. And after, I had a master orthopedic book, and the spine section was written by a guy called Dr. David Bradford. So I thought, okay, let me see, who is this guy? Probably he's an important person because he has written a book. And what he is located? Oh, California, San Francisco. That is a good destination. So I started my process to get an appointment to visit him. So finally I got it and I went to San Francisco in 2001. I spent the time there through 2001 and 2002. And after I started my own practice in the public system in Canary Islands, where I am originally from, and I started to do surgeries there. So that was my date with the spine initially.
I see. One of our mutual mentors, Dr. Oheneba Bowachi, once told me that in order to be a good spine surgeon, you had to have a big heart and a really strong sphincter. I believe you have both. So spine surgery is, so lucky to have you, and we're glad that you decided to not go into general surgery instead. So I'm curious now, at the time you knew you wanted to go into spine surgery, what made you choose the orthopedic route versus the neurosurgery route? Knowing that half of the committee is made up of neurosurgeons, so we don't want to talk too bad about them, but what made you choose the orthopedic spine route instead?
Well, really, because in Spain, that is separated, right? Orthopedic surgery, traumatology and orthopedic surgery, and another specialty is neurosurgery. So as orthopedic surgery, during my residency, I had to spend several months during the year in different specialties, also being orthopedic surgery, also doing orthopedic surgery. I spend time with neurosurgeons, but my orthopedic, the head of my department used to do deformities. So it was a combination. When I started to see him doing spine surgery, doing deformities, and at the same time, I saw how the neurosurgeons manage the spine. So that's why I decided that is what I really want to do.
I see. That's great. What was your experience like, just sort of, contacting Dr. Bradford out of the blue to say, like, hey, I wanna learn from you? What was that like?
Well, that was very funny because initially I asked him if he knew where was Canary Islands, because that is a small area in the Atlantic Ocean, very close to Africa. So not many Americans know who that area is. So, and what he thought about a woman who asked about visiting, and he was laughing about the situation, but he really, I think he felt my enthusiasm about get knowledge from him. And was really a tremendous honor to be with him and also share my time with Serena, who was there at that time, and also Sig Berben, Bedat Berben. All that team was there. So for me, it was really a very, very good period,
Yeah.
And also I realized how Serena was capable of share their own life as a spine surgeon and as a mom, because at that time she really had very small kids, So it was very nice to be there. I spent a very good time there. Even if my English was terrible, I even didn't understand anything at that time. I've never asked Serena what she thought about me, because I had no idea about English, but I used to pay a lot of attention to the surgery, step by step,
Yeah.
Dr. Bradford was very elegant doing the surgery. Serena was very fast, she pushed her a lot. And all of them, they had great qualities. So that really was very important for me. But also after that, I spent time, but a long time after several years being a spine surgeon, I visited Dr. Thomas Lowe in Denver,
Yeah.
So that was another episode in my life, but I don't want to go before your questions.
No, it's really cool that you got to have that experience with such a superstar group, and that's really fantastic. Speaking of your experience with the superstar group and being really active with one, what led to your decision to join SRS?
Oh, that was really when I visited Dr. Lowe, because he has a research team with Ray Marla, and was a research PA, Branton, that I think they continue working with, say, Hess in Denver. And at that time, they were preparing some paperwork for SRS. So I asked about that, and really, I would like to join SRS. So he supported me. He did a recommended letter, and I asked Dr. Bradford also he could help me with that, because I felt the enthusiasm about to share the experience with another surgeons who really do the same practice, big deformities, difficult cases, revision cases, So at that time, and it was very interesting because when I visited Dr. Lowe, I was pregnant. And yes, I was really pregnant with my second, my daughter. And I sent a letter to Dr. Lowe, I would like to go to visit you. But I didn't say him that I was pregnant. And I decided at that time to do that visit because I felt I was not, I had not the same energy to be doing long surgeries by my own. So I arrived then there with also almost 5 months of pregnancy. Was really a crazy situation. And I live at that time in a house in front of the hospital, but with a very fast speed road in front of my house. So was really, I never thought that I was going to be influenced because of my hormonal disorder. And I was so scary living there. I used to sleep with a knife below my pillow. And every day I used to go to the hospital, and the staff was great with me because they really take care of me. They used to put a seat behind when I was exhausted about being long time standing in the operating room. And that was also a very huge experience for me, as a woman, as a spine surgeon, and as a person that really want to increase their knowledge and the skills as spine. So really I was moving by my passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at that time was when I joined SRS.
I see.
So it was the influence of both,
Makes sense. How did you get involved with Dr. Bawachi and Focus?
Well, really, that was also a nice history. When I was with Dr. Lowe, because I had my own practice in Spain, I had a patient, a small guy with 14 years old, with a metatropic dysplasia disease, with a very acute kyphosis and myelopathic. Mm-hmm. So I introduced the case to Dr. Lowe, and he offered me his help. So he told me, I will go with you to help to do that surgery in Canary Islands. Mm. But Dr. Lowe got sick, and finally he died. So I had that patient, and the year after, it was 2006, I think. 2006, I went to SRS, and during the farewell dinner, I was sitting in a table with a Spanish group, and some of them used to have friendship with Dr. Bawachi. So I exchanged my place because Dr. Bawachi came to join us, and he sit in the same table than us. So I exchanged my place with the guy who was beside Dr. Bawachi to be beside of Dr. Bawachi. And during the dinner, I started to tell him about my patient. Oh, do you know, Dr. Bawachi, I have a patient with da. I explained the situation, and he gave me his card, nothing else. So during that next 6 months, I wrote a mail to Dr. Bawachi telling him, please come to help me to Canary Islands. Mm-hmm. But never he said yes. But after 6 months, I am very perseverant, Yeah. So I really convinced him finally. So he came in one of his trips from Ghana. Mm-hmm. He stopped in Canary Island to after continue to Madrid to New York. Yeah. And he stopped in Tenerife. So he really helped me to do that case. Also, I invite Paco Sanchez Perez Hueso to come with him. Both helped me with that case. And during that weekend, I locked Dr. Bawachi in my office, and I spent to show him my cases, yeah. My surgeries, my deformity cases, done by myself. So at that time, he told me, do you know, Dr. Sacramento, would you like to join us in Ghana in our next trip? And I say, of course. And since that time, I've been going there during 10 years, 1 or twice a year. And that has been a huge human experience and a tremendous opportunity to really do very difficult cases, to learn from Oneva, and to learn not only about how he is as a spine surgeon, but also how he is as person. I think he's a superior person with a lot of qualities to join and to push people to be every day better, you know?
Yeah.
So that really has been a very important thing for me in my life.
That's great. So it kind of seems like a theme of your life is that you have this passion for things and then you go for it, and then you are very tenacious, and then awesome things happen, and you meet great champions and wonderful people. So that's awesome. As a plug for this podcast, there's a whole episode where Dr. Bawachi is interviewed that aired July 26th of 2021. So for any of our listeners who want to learn more about Prof, that's a good episode to listen to. But back to our interview here, I'm not going to spill any beans by saying that when the podcast committee folks get together, we come up with different themes for each podcast episode. And sometimes we get inspiration from certain months. In the US, March is a National Women's History Month. And so this episode is interviewing some outstanding female members of SRS, including you, Dr. Sacramento. And so I wanted to ask a couple questions about what it's like, being a woman and a spine surgeon. In the US, only about 6% of all practicing orthopedic surgeons and 14% of residents are female. Is the gender disparity similar in Spain?
Well, actually, when I started, we really were very few women. In fact, I had a colleague who was part of the staff where I did my residency, that she was the first woman orthopedic surgeon in Spain, And at that time, we were just few. But actually, in Spain, at the medicine faculty, 70% of the students are women. So really, that relation has changed. It has experienced a tremendous changes. But it's because the guys doesn't want to study medicine, actually. So the proportion of women studying medicine is 70%. So that means that there are more women in all specialties, also in orthopedic surgery, where it's not so common. It's maybe in a spine surgery, Yeah. So really the proportion of women in doing spine surgery, maybe in Spain, we can count with several hands. Yes, at least in orthopedic.
Yeah. Did you encounter any extra challenges being a woman who wanted to become a spine surgeon throughout your training?
Well, Cynthia, I always say that I never felt discrimination relating being a woman, but really, I have to go through more filters. So it has been more difficult for me as a woman demonstrate my value.
Yeah.
I think so. So doing the same, being a woman, maybe, or also getting several steps, you have to demonstrate that you have the value because of you, like a person, not like a woman or like a guy. Do you know?
Right, of course.
So yes, because always there are some sarcastic comment coming from guys. Related your position. So, and it's something that sometimes I hear not only about me, also when some women also at SRS, some leadership who introduce some lecture, there's always some common, a little sarcastic, related the value of that person,
Yeah.
and that is only because of that. It's because I really don't care, I don't like, but I don't care, because always I think that is a poor comment come from a poor person.
Yeah.
Yeah. That maybe feel scared about the
changing world.
Yes.
Yeah.
But really it has been that way. But never discrimination.
Great. And so you rose through the ranks, and now you're chief of spine surgery at the University of Navarra. Do you have any tips for other people about how to deal with that kind of underhanded criticism or those microaggressions?
Well, I think at the beginning, I tried to demonstrate that I had force enough to cut a stainless steel rod, like to demonstrate that I was the same. And really, with time, I have to say we are not the same. We have really different capabilities, different qualities, and they are stronger. And I have not to demonstrate my force. It's not something about force. It's something about skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's something about intelligence, or about, the more important advice that I could give maybe is that we have to be where we are women. We have not to hide our femininity. So if I like to go over hills, why not? I am going to be over hills. That is not going to change my value as a spine surgeon, or so only I like to be with a cart or a mini cart. Doesn't matter with this. So I have not to imitate the way how the man dress, for example. If I like, it's okay. But if I don't like, I have not to imitate that kind of dress, because that way the other world is going to have more consideration about me as a conference person, or no. I think that is a mistake. We are equal. We the woman and the man, we are equal. I don't share the supremacist feminism either. I want about I like the idea that we are equal and we have to respect each other. So I think we have to wait to the woman as a woman, and to wait the man as a man. And I think really we can share many things, and we can increase our value working together. That's my point.
Yeah.
And and it has not been. That's my knowledge after going through different situations.
Yeah.
Because also when I was my pregnancy, my first kid, I hid my pregnancy. I hid my pregnancy because I felt, and in fact, for sure that was going to be that way, that I was going to lose my job, because I had not a fixed position at that time. If they knew that that I was pregnant, so I used to wear double lead mantle at the operating room, and I was very dizzy, and I tried to hide that situation, and that is, I think that has changed actually. Maybe there's something like that. For sure, it's not easy to get the familiar conciliation,
Yeah.
Being a professional, being a spine surgeon who demand a lot of hours in your job, and being a mom, being a wife or being, so it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's possible for sure.
Yeah.
That's why I think we as women, we are so special. That's my point.
Yeah. And thanks to pioneers like you, I think for, the next generation, it's easier to be pregnant and be a mom and be a woman with a family in spine surgery. Although there are still, of course, some challenges, and I wanted to sort of touch on that. But for background for the listeners, I have a 15-month-old. So just very recently, I was trying to do spine surgery while pregnant, and yeah, there are parts of it that are hard. Do you have any advice for me during my next future pregnancies on how to deal with some of the physical aches of being pregnant and doing a long case?
Well, yes, I have some advice. You have to bring stocks. How do you say? I don't know how to say.
Compression stockings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You have to bring that, and you have to don't feel shy about sit. Sometimes during the surgery. Why not?
Yeah.
And for sure we are with a hyperlordotic situation, with overweight, with tissue laxity. So it's not the same. It's really hard. So why not? We cannot sit during the surgery. I think we have to educate our environment about and give naturalism about the issue that we are pregnant. And mainly, I advise you to have as many kids as you will love, because I sacrifice that because I think it's so important to be woman and decide to don't have kids. I respect that. That is a decision that you have as a woman.
Yes.
And the same way, it's great if you decide to have kids and if you decide to have many kids. So yes. And in my personal experience, I will have love to have more kids, and I decided at that time just to do two, because that was to have more kids could border my professional projection. And with time, I think that was not good. So the only thing that you need is to planify your life, and I think always there are new opportunities in the work world about you as a spine surgeon. So I think it's something that we have to consider. Never sacrifice your feelings or your what really you like because of your career. I think actually it's easier to conciliate both things.
Yeah, definitely. And then that applies to women and men and yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to spend doing this interview with me and us for our listeners. Thank you so much for being a great friend and a role model. And we won't take more time out of your time off to spend with your family. But thank you so much for today.
Oh, thank you to you, Cynthia. I really share a very good time with you. And I push you to do everything you will love.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today in this celebration of Women's History Month. My name is Michelle Welborn, and I'm the Chief of Spine Surgery over at the Shriners Hospital in Portland, Oregon. And I have the distinct pleasure of talking with Dr. Fran Farley, who is not only my boss, but she was the first female chief medical officer of the Shriners Hospital system. She has over 200 publications. She did Duke for undergraduate, Cornell for medical school, and she did a residency at the University of Michigan. She subsequently did her fellowship at Texas Scottish Rite Hospital for Children. She returned to the University of Michigan, where she founded the Pediatric Orthopedic Fellowship. She then later became the chief of pediatric orthopedic surgery there and was the chief for 18 years. She was granted the Hensinger Endowed Professorship. And then more recently, as I said, has moved on to become the Chief Medical Officer of the entire Shriner system. It's a distinct pleasure to be able to talk with Dr. Farley today. Good morning, Dr. Farley. How are you?
Thank you, Michelle, for your kind introduction, and I'm excited to be here.
So I think this is a particularly exciting talk right now, as there has been some pretty big changes for women within orthopedics over the past few years. Obviously, women still lag behind within orthopedics in that the overall population, about 51%, is female, and women comprise 50% of female medical students, but only 14% of current orthopedic residents are women, and 3% of spine surgeons are women. And that is also reflected within the population of SRS, where roughly 3% of the active members are also women. So for you, you were a real standard bearer for us. You paved the path for many women. Can you tell us how you got into orthopedics and then specifically spine surgery?
So my brother had scoliosis, and he was taken care of by Dr. David Levine at the Hospital for Special Surgery. And he actually had he has Marfan syndrome and had infantile scoliosis. And so at a very young age, I was exposed to orthopedics and to pediatric orthopedics and spine surgery. My interest grew from there.
And this was an interest that was shared by your whole family. I understand that your mom was very active in the OREF and in fundraising for that, as well as for HSS. Can you tell us a little bit more about the impact of that on your life?
Yes, I'm very proud of my mother and the work she did. When my brother was diagnosed with infantile scoliosis, and as she became involved in his treatment, she became a very, very effective fundraiser for orthopedics and for spine surgeons, particularly at the Hospital for Special Surgery, and then at the larger academy, American Academy for Orthopedic Surgeons. They had, at the time, the American Academy for Orthopedic Surgeons had a lay board of supporters, and she was on that board for a long period of time. And she was very inspiring in terms of her commitment to handicapped children and to scoliosis treatment as well.
She ultimately received an honorary degree from the OREF. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so that path and your brother's experience impacted you pretty profoundly. I understand that you wound up going on to working with Dr. Levine. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship and the role that he had in your life?
Dr. Levine was my first mentor, and it's interesting that when I was in high school and college, I wanted to have a summer job at the Hospital for Special Surgery, and so he quickly introduced me to the rheumatologist, where I even got a Arthritis Foundation grant working with the rheumatologist at Special Surgery. I didn't think, and maybe he didn't think, that I would end up in orthopedics, but he was always supportive in whatever interests I had.
So as a high schooler, you got a grant.
Well, it was the high schooler. It was actually because I was working for several summers, I got the grant, during college, but I did start in high school working at special surgery.
So both of those things are pretty impressive, to be working as a high schooler at special surgery and then to be getting a grant while you're in college. That must have been pretty impactful for you. And I mean, clearly a huge accomplishment already.
Yes, I was very honored and glad to be part of it. As I say, it was in rheumatology, which didn't end up being my calling, but I always am very appreciative of the rheumatologists and have a very good relationship with them.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, talk to us about how you wound up getting interested in orthopedics specifically, and how you kind of transitioned from, say, working in the rheumatology world to deciding you kind of wanted to go down that same path.
So I always wanted to be an pediatric orthopedic surgeon. That was the whole impetus for doing the research in the summer, having a leg up and just climbing the ladder as I saw it. And so I thought the rheumatologic research was interesting, but the minute I got into the clinical during medical school, when you start your clinic rotations, I was attracted to surgery. And I knew from the very start, I went to medical school to be a pediatric orthopedist, which I think was a big advantage because I didn't have to look at anything else. And, I did try to look at other things, but nothing made as much sense as pediatric orthopedics.
And how did that transition into spine surgery?
It was within pediatric orthopedics, my focus always from the start. And even during the training, like, for instance, I always made sure during my training that the spine training would be important. So I was a fellow at Texas Scottish Rite Hospital, and the fellowship that you do is in pediatric orthopedics and scoliosis. So it's always been a big part of my training has been scoliosis and spine surgery.
Yeah. And you've had a number of wonderful mentors over the year, and some of them kind of came spontaneously into your life. I know that you had mentioned Mark Asher in the past.
Right. I would be remiss in not saying that Bob Hensinger has always been my primary mentor, and I essentially really sought out the University of Michigan because of his leadership there and did my residency there and then was a junior faculty member there. So he was my main mentor, but I had other mentors along the way and oftentimes in surprising ways. I remember once I was discouraged because I had been working on a biomechanics project for a single rod and having trouble getting that published, and had gotten a portion of our work published. And Dr. Asher just out of the blue wrote me a letter of encouragement. And that meant a great deal to me at a time when I was really wrestling with which direction to go. And he was very supportive of the work and encouraged me to keep working. And that was very important. And so I think that as a mentor, I always try to remember, sometimes you have to reach out and it can be very impactful.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you've had a number of men that have been incredibly supportive and helped to guide you in your career. Have there been any female mentors in particular or people that you looked up to? I believe you once described some of the founding women in orthopedics as rugged individualists.
So I did seek out women mentors along the way. There in Michigan the University of Michigan residency has a long tradition of women in the residency program. And Edie Hunter, who is a sports surgeon in Atlanta, was my predecessor. And and there were several others who trained, and some even in pediatric orthopedics. And I always sought out those people at meetings to touch base, and they have provided guidance along the way as well.
That's wonderful. And clearly you've sought to change things along the way because you had several wonderful female faculty under you and women that you've mentored. Can you talk to us about some of these women, Michelle Keard?
Yes, I'm very proud of not only the women faculty at Michigan that I've mentored, but I started the fellowship in pediatric orthopedics at the University of Michigan, and I'm very proud of the fellows, female and male, and I feel that mentoring is really important. Mentors have been very important to my pathway in orthopedics, and I feel now it's time to give back, and have felt that giving back and mentoring is really important. I'm very proud of Michelle Keard, who's one of the first department chairmen in orthopedics. As a woman, she's the chair of the Department of Orthopedics at Michigan. And I'm very proud of Ying Li, my other former partner, who's now the chief of pediatric orthopedics at the University of Michigan, and really excited about early onset scoliosis. And I'm very proud of both of their accomplishments.
Well, that's wonderful. As you mentioned that you said that you've mentored a lot of men and women and just had a huge impact on all of these former fellows. Is there any way that you mentor men versus women differently, or is it more about the individual?
It's somewhat more about the individual. I pay attention probably, and my kids, I have 2 sons and a daughter. My children would probably say I pay attention fairly to both women and the men. I particularly pay attention to make sure the women are being adequately mentored. Because sometimes you have to be, in terms of being a mentee, you have to be proactive about that. And sometimes that's very hard in a new environment to reach out to somebody and say, hey, will you be my mentor? And so I don't think I mentor them differently, but I probably make sure that the women are taking advantage of all the opportunities.
And is there anything that you're doing specifically to make sure that young women and kind of underrepresented minorities are moving up and getting that mentoring that they need, but while also making sure that it's fair for everybody?
Yes, I think your statement is extremely important, that you have to work on both sides of it, making sure they're fair. But anytime you're considering a position that's come open, a leadership position that's come open, that you don't just jump to the first person that comes into your head, that you really make a concerted effort to be inclusive of everyone who is qualified for the job.
And are there any specific tips that you have for young trainees and early faculty for dealing with things like, say, imposter syndrome, and how to even be proactive about seeking out that mentorship? Tips for people like me.
I'm happy to give tips. In terms of imposter syndrome, I think everybody has imposter syndrome. I think anybody who's in a leadership position, unless they're completely arrogant or completely unsure of the responsibilities of the position, should feel like they have imposter syndrome. Somebody said to me a long time ago, if you're not staying awake at night the night before a big spine operation, then you need to think about that you take very seriously the leadership opportunities you have, and you take very seriously the surgical opportunities that we have. And both of those are serious, and you need to just pay attention to those opportunities. And I read somewhere that somebody said that if you're spending all your time worrying about, I think this was somebody at Yale, that you're spending all your time worrying about the imposter syndrome, you just can't move forward. So just set a limit on the time period that you have for feeling like you're inadequate, because everybody does.
So you mentioned staying up and thinking about spine surgery, and I'm sure that's also thinking about kind of complications. And
right.
How do you counsel your female faculty and your mentees and just your faculty in general about overcoming those complications and second victim syndrome, especially kind of early in your career, until maybe you've developed either a little bit more of a thick skin, or maybe you just have a little bit more road under your feet where you have a better idea as to what to expect?
So in the moment, I have a couple of thoughts on that. So in the moment that you have the complication, there's an acute phase where something has happened, I always counsel people, and it was written right into our protocol at the University of Michigan, to call a friend or talk through that with another spine surgeon. This is what's happened. This is what I've done. Is there anything else I should have done or can do now? And you should talk through with them in real time, particularly if you're having a change in spinal cord function or something like that. That you talk through and make sure that you've done everything that you can. In the chronic phase, after something like that has happened, I also suggest that you talk through options and also your feeling about things. Be mindful about, the next day. Is it best for you? One of my mentors, Dr. Hensinger, always said, get back on the horse. But is that the best thing? The next day, if you have a long case, maybe if you can change around your schedule and do something less taxing, just be mindful of the stress and the attention that you're going to need to pay for that, the attention that you're going to need to pay to that complication and the person that has had the complication.
Yeah, I think that's so true about the different phases of that recovery, and certainly how this affects us for much longer than even the first few hours or the first few days. And I know in my case, it's really sometimes changed how I treat other kids down the road, and trying to make sure that that's a good thing and not necessarily being reactive has always been something I think that's important for me.
Right. There's two things that I think you need to do after you've had a serious complication. One is try your best to remain in good communication with the patient and their family. That's the time to really pay close attention. Sometimes you feel like, I'm just being a bother, but that's the time when you really need to hone in and make sure that communication is as good as it should be. And if you're a mentor and somebody's reached out to you in that situation, make sure you follow up with them and make sure they're doing okay the next week and the next month, because that's a responsibility. Once somebody's reached out to you in that time of need, you really need to follow through and make sure that they're doing okay, not even in the long term.
Yeah, that's great. And that follow through, I think, is what really distinguishes true mentorship, right? And that wonderful long-term relationship that just really makes a difference for both people, right? Not just the mentee, but also for the mentor. So I know that we don't have much more time, but one of the things that's really been notable about you and also about all of your female faculty that you worked with is that they all seem to be really well balanced. Michelle Caird often talks about her family, and somehow she manages to find time to be the chief of orthopedics, have a big research practice, and spend time with her family. So clearly you've been an incredible influence for her. What tips do you have for having a family and an academic orthopedic career? Were there any struggles you found particularly challenging? And what did you do differently for the women in your department? And what would you recommend differently for people like me?
So that's a great question. And I think in terms of work-life balance, I think I've had a terrible work-life balance, and that people should learn from that. Rather, I always tried to make it look like I was very relaxed, and I don't think I fooled my work partners, and I don't think I fooled my family at all. So I think I was too focused on climbing the ladder at the same time as I was having kids and raising my family. And so I dealt with that by cutting out friendships, free time. I would either be working or raising my children. And I think at several times in my life, I can point to times when I was very stressed out and, of course, not acknowledging it. And I think that can lead to burnout and things like that. So I think I should have paid more attention to the work-life balance than I did. And I think my peers recognize that, and hopefully they're learning from that too.
It's interesting that you specifically make that comment, because that's something that Serena Hu mentioned. There was a half-day course a few years ago, and a number of panelists, and they're all talking about making sure that they had hobbies and making sure that they, did things like sail and play musical instruments. And Serena said that her life was her family and her kids and then work. And I would say that I have found myself falling into that as well. And so, really tried to make sure to not do that to the extreme, but it seems as though there are so many choices that we have to make along the way, and kind of really prioritizing that. And thankfully, it sounds like for the three of us and for many more, the family is still staying right up there as number one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that the work-life balance is something you need to intentionally pay attention to, and hobbies are really important. I always said my hobbies were like the research part of my job, which is very lame. I know, as my kids would tell me, that's just very lame.
Oh my God, that's what my husband says about me, that research is my hobby.
Right. And guess what? That's not a very good hobby. That you need to be good at research. You need to be excellent at it. You also need to have hobbies.
That'll be my to-do list for 2025. Well, Fran, we are coming to the end of our session together, and it has been so wonderful talking with you. Is there anything else that you'd like to be able to share with our audience today or share with young surgeons out there?
I would like to share a real thanks to the Scoliosis Research Society. They have supported me when I needed a grant for practical reasons, and I had good research ideas. I have been supported through the research. I have had opportunities to present on a national stage, international stage, actually, when I was a resident. I have had a plethora of opportunities and am very grateful to the Scoliosis Research Society, which I'm very proud to be a member of.
Yeah, I agree. They have been so incredibly welcoming, and I feel have done more to help me to grow as a human, as a surgeon, and as a researcher than anything else in my life. So it's an honor to talk with you today. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, for all. I'm very proud to have you in as a Shriner surgeon and as a active member of the Scoliosis Research Society, and am delighted that we could spend this time together.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.